What if I told you that one of the most famous and iconic films ever made has one disturbing element to the story that goes completely overlooked? What if when examining the details, what seems like a fun-filled fantasy has a more sinister plot? Hello friends, this is Grease speaking. Today we're going to take a look at A Trip to the Moon, a 15-minute film following a group of scientists as they travel to the moon and take a deeper look at some parts of the story that are kind of disturbing even though it's not portrayed as such. This film is 120 years old, which means there's no person living today that was alive when the film was made in 1902. Weird. There's something about these really old films from the first few decades of filmmaking that I actually find really creepy, especially when you're watching a version without music. Maybe it's the movement of the characters, which always seem sped up and jittery, or the old school theater-like costumes, makeup, and sets. But all I know is when I watch a movie like this and that off-white glow of the TV screen lights up a dark room deep into the night, it always just gives me the chills. Like this Alice in Wonderland film from 1915, for instance. That bunny waving looks so creepy, and this isn't even supposed to be scary. We could talk all day about Nosferatu, which just recently hit its 100th anniversary, and after all that time, Dracula moving down the hallway is still horrifying if you're in the right state of mind. Anyway, what were we talking about? Oh, right. Although A Trip to the Moon is over 100 years old, it's still one of the most iconic films of all time. Even if you haven't seen the film, you've likely seen this image of the moon with the ship in its eye. I've always found that moon face really unsettling for whatever reason. Anyway, although the title is sort of self-explanatory, there's actually some depth that I didn't quite expect. Every time I rewatch it, I always think the end of the movie is when they land on the moon and completely forget about what happens after. So let me do a quick summary of the story. Starting out, we watch as a group of scientists plan a trip to the moon. They argue for a while before deciding that the best way to do it is to make a space capsule in the shape of a bullet and launch it out of a huge cannon right at the moon. And they actually do. They build it, and for whatever reason, it actually works. Forget SpaceX, man. I want to take this ship. These dudes live wild and I dig it. So it jabs right into the eye of the moon, who once again skeeves me out. So the eggheads successfully land on the moon and all climb out, with no helmets, suits, or breathing apparatus of any kind. But hey, they brought umbrellas, so there's that. The moon looks like an alien planet from a sci-fi film, by the way. But then again, this is a sci-fi film. It's actually the first sci-fi film ever made. And technically it is an alien planet, so... You know, it's interesting because all this has to be seen through the lens of 1902. I mean, we were still 66 years away from landing on the moon, and so the idea of traveling in space at all was truly science fiction at the time. It's just that now we know so much more and all of it seems ridiculous, but also wearing a top hat in space is really rad, so. Now that they've made it, they're all tired from the trip and sleep, which is one of the cooler scenes to me because of all the cool set pieces and effects that they use here. Well, after they wake up and journey a little bit more, they run into a selenite. This is an insectoid alien inhabitant of the moon, named after one of the Greek moon goddesses, Selene. That's what the creator called them anyway. I always called them moonlings, but I've been educated once again by the pretentious gall of Wikipedia, so. Anyway, they're scared of the thing, which I would be too, because it starts sliding its ass on the ground like a dog with worms. Finally, the main scientist dude whacks him and he vanishes in a satisfying poof. Well, what are you gonna do? It's just a ravaging, mindless space creature after all. So another one comes out and the dude whacks this one as well, obliterating the thing. But eventually the whole squad shows up and overruns them, taking them captive. They're taken to the Selenite King in a pretty well put together castle. It actually seems fairly sophisticated, so I guess they're not just creatures, but conscious beings. Well, it doesn't matter. Now they're all brought before the king, and at least this will be a good chance to explain themselves, maybe learn from one another, start a whole new galactic friendship that'll lead to trade, scientific development, and oh my god! He just picked the Selenite King up like a ragdoll and popped that mofo. They take off running at this point and the whole damn army chases them. Luckily they make it to the ship and hop in, although the leader of the explorers is stuck outside and grabs a rope attached to the ship. Also a Selenite jumps after them and grabs the ship. They fall back to Earth and land in the ocean because that's how that works. Anyway, everyone celebrates them and it's this beautiful magical ending. I mean, they're the good guys, right? Right? Well, I'm sorry to disillusion you, but these travelers are actually barbaric psychos. I admit that on a casual viewing, the explorers come off as fighting for their lives and barely making it out alive, but let me explain. Remember when they first encounter the Selenite? Sure, the thing was acting weird, but he certainly wasn't a threat unless you consider him dragging his ass on the ground in attack. He was probably just scared and freaking out before our main man here kills him with an umbrella. Okay, this is a complicated situation. They both perceived each other as potential threats and were both afraid. It's somewhat defendable that the head scientist took a swing at him when he got close, and there's no way he could have guessed that the alien species explodes on impact, so let's give him a pass here. But now a second Selenite appears, once again not really coming off as an attacker, but just jumpy, which seems to be a natural part of how the Selenites move. But also, he just watched one of his comrades blow up, so it makes sense that he's a bit wily. Now the scientist explodes him as well, and at this point the scientist has no excuse because he knew it would kill him. After this, a large group of the Moonlings show up and overpower them, taking them captive. By the way, it's worth noting that the aliens could have just attacked them and easily killed them, but chose not to despite having every reason to take them out for the unprovoked killing of their kin. So as before mentioned, they're taken to the king, who's like, okay, what's all this fuss about? What's going on here? And there is a moment here where the king seems to use gestures that suggest he's demanding the humans be killed. But for one thing, this is an alien creature, so it's highly unlikely he would use a common earthly expression like that. I mean, we don't really know what that means. But it doesn't really matter either way, because if that's what he's demanding, it would be justified because of the unnecessary killing of two innocent aliens, especially in a more primitive culture. Anyway, before any actual discussion or judgment can commence, the main scientist guy breaks free of his hand ties and yeets the king into the moon's cold, harsh surface, exploding him as well. So now the humans have killed 3 Selenites unprovoked and left these aliens with an empty throne and empty hearts. So now the ending celebration. You could completely disagree with my interpretation of the situation on the moon, but this final scene is the most disturbing part and stands alone in its barbaric nature. It's worth noting that this last sequence was actually not in a lot of the original versions of this film. After the scientists are awarded their moon ribbons and the whole town celebrating them, a Selenite is dragged out on a leash and whipped repeatedly. This is the alien that jumped on the back of their ship and thus fell back with them to Earth, somehow surviving. Worse than that though, the dude manhandling him puts a pole under the Selenite's raised hands and forces it to dance as the entire town, including children, laugh and cheer. So they go to another planet, encounter intelligent life, instantly murder 2 of this species, and then kill their king before taking one captive on Earth and using it like a slave, whipping and beating it so that it'll dance for the entertainment of the Earthlings. Once you look at the film in this context, this particular scene is both cruel and disturbing. So there you have it. Maybe like me, you'll never look at this classic film the same way. Maybe you always saw it that way, or maybe you think I'm just full of crap and took a ton of liberties in order to make something out of nothing. Honestly, it's probably the latter. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this one. It's a little different than some of my other content, but I want to do more short and sweet videos like this in between some of the bigger videos I typically do. I'm hoping to get to the point where I can do both one longer video and a shorter video in a week, but it's a work in progress. Thanks everyone for watching, subscribe if you like my gray face, and as always, this is Grief speaking. Goodbye, friends.